Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're finally tackling the black-green or golgari lifegain deck that's mostly centered around the new Professor Dellian Fel, a 4-mana planeswalker that starts out at 5 loyalty and will often be interested in using the +2 ability right away, gaining us 3 life. And then we can maybe set up the -6 emblem on the following turn, saying whenever we gain life, target opponent loses that much life, which is going to be our primary win condition in this deck. Since we are not playing any main deck creatures, we do have some creature lands, and then we're mostly trying to close out the game with our planeswalkers, including this emblem, which will pretty quickly close out the game, since we've got so much incidental life gain, even besides the +2 ability from the Professor. In the meantime, the Professor can also draw cards at the cost of a life, or -3 to destroy target creature, which can also line up very nicely if our opponent just has one creature in play, so we can hopefully take it out and then keep our Professor in play going forward. There's many ways we can set up the Professor on turn 3 already in this deck, thanks to the full set of shared roots, getting a basic land, and the one-off Terminus of Return. Not interested in the Harness ability since we're not playing any creatures, but it's still just an indestructible ramp card to set up a turn 3 Professor. And then some of the other newcomers include the Withering Curse, which I'm also building the mana base around, since we can potentially destroy all creatures as early as turn 3 in this deck, since I'm playing the full set of Adventures In, which gains 2 life when it enters. So if we started with 2 black producing lands, then now we can Withering Curse and immediately destroy all creatures. Otherwise, the curse can still give creatures -2/-2 until end of turn, and that can sometimes be good enough in certain matchups, but we've got plenty of life gain to reliably enable it. And then another new sweeper in black-green is the Vicious Rivalry. 4 mana, as an additional cost to cast it, we do need to pay X life, and then we get to destroy all artifacts and creatures with mana value X or less. So this is especially powerful against the Simulacrum Synthesizer builds, which have fallen out of favor recently in Best of 1, but they do occasionally show up, and this is basically an instant win if you can resolve it, as it'll blow up all the opponent's artifacts. The only downside being that this also destroys our own artifact. Of course, the Terminus is indestructible, but we also have 3 copies of the Ancient Cornucopia, which is here to gain life and enable the Withering Curse mostly, because whenever we cast a spell that's 1 or more colors, we may gain a life for each of that spell's colors, only once each turn. So if we cast a Withering Curse, the Cornucopia trigger resolves before the curse itself, so then the curse will end up destroying all creatures, and the Cornucopia can also make a mana of any color to keep ramping towards our 5 and 6 mana plays, where we also have 2 copies of the Decorum Dissertation as a card with the Paradigm mechanic. So once this resolves and we paid 2 life to draw 2 cards, from now on we get to cast it for free in every upkeep, so we get to keep drawing more cards, and we've got plenty of life gain to offset the life loss, so that's usually not a problem. And then besides the Professor, our major win condition is going to be Liliana Dreadhorde General, which can often come down using the -4 ability, making each player sacrifice 2 creatures, and then we can start plussing, making zombie tokens. If those creatures die, we also get to draw a card, and the -9 ultimate can also potentially be game ending. And then we've got another important win condition hidden in our mana base with a Restless Cottage, which can animate into a 4/4 creature that when it attacks not only exiles a card from a graveyard, giving us some incidental graveyard hate, but it also makes a food token, which we can sacrifice to gain 3 life to further synergize with the Professor's emblem and to help offset any life loss from the Decorum, or perhaps the Phyrexian Arena, which is kind of like a smaller version of the Decorum, drawing 1 card at the cost of 1 life each turn, but we can get it down a little bit sooner. And then rounding out the deck, it's mostly more interaction with 2 copies of Duress as a discard spell, especially effective against combo and control strategies where maybe the removal's not that important. We've got Requiting Hex as instant speed removal, can occasionally also blight with it to gain more life if we maybe have a zombie token in play or if our cottage is about to get destroyed. And then at 2 mana, we've got the Strategic Betrayal, making the opponent exile a creature and their entire graveyard. That's also important against some of the Spelemental decks, which rely on a graveyard to cast their creatures, and of course another great tool in the Kavero matchup, which is otherwise pretty tough. And that's also where Cease Desist can come in handy, mostly using the Desist half for 2 mana as an instant to exile up to 2 cards from a single graveyard. We gain 2 life and draw a card. Also counts as a multicolored spell for the Cornucopia to maybe gain 2 life in the opponent's turn. Occasionally can use the Desist half, although we'll also blow up our own artifacts and enchantments that we have in play, but can also be a lifesaver against the Jeskai Artifacts deck. And then the Cease Desist in the graveyard also counts as a combined 8 mana value, which is very useful to set up or collect evidence cards. We've got 1 copy of Urgent Necropsy. As an additional cost to cast it, we collect evidence X, where X is the total mana value of permanence it targets, and we can target up to 1 creature, artifact, enchantment, and planeswalker all at once. So this can also be a very effective answer if our opponent's got a lot of diversity in their threats. And then we also have another collect evidence card with Deadly Cover-Up, which can just wipe the board, and then if we collect that evidence, we can extract a specific card out of the opponent's deck. Also very effective against combo decks and against reanimator decks like Kevero, where we want to get rid of a specific card so they can't combo us. And then 1 Maelstrom Pulse to round it out as another flexible answer, giving us a few more answers to enchantments specifically, since we've got lots of answers to artifacts with a rivalry, so then having a few more for enchantments can also come in handy. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up. The mana base packing the 4 adventures in to enable the Withering Curse, but the extra life gain also doesn't hurt, since we've got plenty of mana fixing thanks to the Shared Roots and Cornucopia, and we mostly need black mana, just a little bit of green throughout, so the mana requirements aren't too demanding, and then the Restless Cottage also being an important part of it here to help end games, or to make a 4/4 blocker to protect our planeswalkers. And then we've got all the untapped dual lands entering untapped later in the game, so even though we could be playing Blooming Marsh, I prefer not to in this more controlling deck, since it's important that our lands enter untapped later, and then plenty of basics that we can find with the Shared Roots. So yeah, that's pretty much our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw. We've got a keepable hands, some interaction, bit of ramp. Still missing a card draw engine. Turn 1 elves, weaken Hex. And a Pollinator, so opponent's got the whole ramp package. Playing blue as well. Still leaning Shared Roots over Duress. Can't think of too many must-take 3 mana non-creature spells that I would want to Duress. Possible they have Nature's Rhythm, but we can probably still take that next turn. So it should be a matchup where our board wipes are effective. Alright, Corpses of the Lost. So possible that there's some Changeling synergy here at play. Yeah, Duress would have been a nice answer to the Corpses, but was not expecting that. So I'll start with Duress, see what else they have in hand, and then we can decide. They had a Spell Pierce, and then Uroboroid coming up. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of damage. So I think we still go for Phyrexian Arena here. Keep Pulse to answer Uroboroid, but mostly hope to draw a Sweeper. We've got Adventure Sin to enable our 3 mana board wipe. So our opponent's committing. Liliana is 1 turn away. So this turn I can go Cornucopia into Maelstrom Pulse, gaining a bit of life in the process. Opponent draws an Elves. And a tap land. Okay, so Liliana should be in a decent spot to stabilize us. Can just make a zombie, could also -4, but then we lose Liliana. So I think plussing to make a zombie seems better. Although I could be dead to a removal spell on the 2/2 now. All going after Liliana, so we'll just chump the 4/3. I'll get to draw, only lose 3 loyalty, so I could still -4 if needed. And we're drawing a lot of lands here. Wow. Okay, so what does that mean for me? Just make another zombie, I think. If I minus, we get rid of the 2 mana dorks, but that doesn't really solve my problem. Yeah, would have hoped to draw at least one spell I can cast. Another Corpses of the Lost would be very bad, another Ouroboros. Opponent's got multiple top decks that could win them the game. Opponent moves to attackers. And still goes after Liliana. Alright, so I get to jump and draw another card. And we have to be getting closer to a sweeper. Professor's not bad either. And that's a bunch more land. So if I play the Professor, probably just destroy the skeleton at this point and then keep making zombies. I'll gain 4 between Adventureson and the Professor with Cornucopia. It is tempting to try and set up an ultimate, but I should control the board first. They might have a counterspell too here.
Class is now in session.
And then I could also animate the Restless Cottage here on defense. Tactics is going to be pretty disappointed to see 5 lands in hand. But yeah, now we get to untap with 2 active Planeswalkers, so we should be in great shape. And the cottage is gonna try and get busy. They can return the corpses to hands, which they do. Alright, let's gain some life. And yeah, opponent has seen enough. We can animate the cottage to start applying some pressure as well here. And despite drawing our fair share of lands, we still got there. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We've got Cornucopia to enable Withering Curse. So we'll give it a shot. Turn 4, we can wipe the board. And then Cornucopia gets us closer to casting Liliana. Facing a multicolor red deck, maybe blue-red. Betrayal gives us some graveyard hate. But doesn't seem to be a graveyard combo deck. I see, maybe dragons, so... Our removal should be effective. And Cornucopia triggers even when we don't tap it for mana. In case they had the 3 mana Clarion Conqueror. Of course, haste creatures are effective against sorcery speed removal. And the Hellkite can hit one of our lands. Okay, so Withering Curse is an option. Still just a 1-for-1. And next turn I'll be able to Liliana. Yeah, I'll keep the cheaper Betrayal in hand. So Hellkite hits us for 4 again. Would prefer using the -4 on Liliana if there's 2 creatures in play, or hopefully drawing some cards. So using the -4 now exposes it to a burn spell. They could also have Get Lost as removal. So all that to say, I don't think I play Liliana here. I would rather play Cornucopia here into Strategic Betrayal. Keep the curse to wipe the board. And then maybe next turn we can start making zombies. Also reasonable to curse again, keep the Betrayal so I can more easily double spell Betrayal with Liliana in one turn. But if they do double spell here, then we might want to sweeper. Or just set up the -4. Right, Voice of Victory is fine. Into Clarion Conqueror, which shuts down the Cornucopia. Alright, so we've got options. I don't hate Liliana, just -4, answer both creatures. Does mean Liliana dies to another hasty dragon. If they have a burn spell, they can also more easily take her out. If I first wipe the board with a plan of starting to plus Liliana, it's maybe weaker in the face of a Get Lost, so yep, there's a bit of compromising going on. I think I do just Withering Curse for now. And then next turn we can more easily start plussing Liliana, so she doesn't die to another Hellkite, for instance. Now Momo into a Dragonhawk. So now the -4 looks decent once again. And so does Deadly Cover-Up, which will also let us look at their hand. Yeah, that information is pretty valuable. And then what's the scariest card in circulation here? Probably Dragonhawk. They likely have a bunch more. And the Hellkite already got exiled, so I can't hit that one. They actually had another one in hand. One in library. So your pretty typical Dragons list. 2 copies of Get Lost. And then 4 Burst Lightning, which could also maybe finish off Liliana. The Maelstrom, a way to tutor up a dragon. Alright, so they'll get to draw a card here. Still at 17. Would love to find some more card draw. Whether it's the Professor or a Phyrexian Arena. But yeah, opponent does not want to play this one out. They probably don't have much action left in hand. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a keepable hand. Missing some cheaper interaction, but being on the play should help out. And then Cornucopia into a couple Planeswalkers. Facing the Artifact deck, it seems. Could also be Kona Combo. Kona Combo is one of our worst matchups since we don't have much in the way of instant speed removal. Could still be Artifacts. Against Artifacts, we've got the new 4-mana Sweeper, although it would also destroy the Cornucopia, interestingly enough. But that's one of our best cards, being able to just blow up all Artifacts with mana value 3 or less. Okay, Lessons from Life. Makes me unsure, I guess could still be Kona. Yeah, in that case, maybe I wait on the Professor to play around the counter unless you pay 2 if they have a dragon in hand. And play another Cornucopia for now. Although they don't seem to have anything. Now Consult to look for lanes. They must already have most other combo pieces in hand. If they kept a bit of a sketchy one. So what's the fastest to kind of punish the opponent for stumbling? A Liliana plus to 7, 8, 9 and then ultimate versus Professor. Next turn can ultimate and we've got double Cornucopia to gain life. I think that's going to be better for me. Can cease in the opponent's turn to once again trigger both Cornucopias. Or I could wait to emblem first. Although I probably want to play Liliana next turn. This is of course also great if we were up against Artifacts, but I don't think we are. So our opponent can most likely combo off next turn, unless I maybe find a Duress. This could be a Spell Snare. Yep. Oh, that's a Duress. That's huge. So I think we draw instead of embleming. So I can maybe still play Liliana alongside Duress. Right. then the rest has to be more important. Can also cast Cover Up with Collect Evidence if needed. And they have Kona, Double Regent, and Omniscience, so we have to take the Omniscience. And then I can extract it out of their deck. So they can't Kona combo me. And then we see Avatar, a Runes card. Those are all ways to kind of loop their cards and get access to sideboard win conditions as well. Of course, they do still have some large creatures they can cheat in, like the River Regent, which can also bounce my Planeswalkers. So they can still try to win the fair way. But yeah, that duress kept us in the game. So Regent, bounce Cornucopia and Professor. And now I'm going to be a mana short of Liliana, but we can Withering Curse. So go Cornucopia into Withering Curse. And then they'll bounce Kona, perhaps, which is fine by me. Opponent bounces the Regent. Yeah, without Omniscience, their deck is a lot less scary. We can manage creatures at sorcery speed, even if they bounce some of our stuff. A land means Liliana is now an option too. Or I can go Cornucopia, play Professor and destroy the Regent. And then feel free to bounce it again, and yeah, our opponent has given up. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand, got some ramp, graveyard hate, sweepers, card draw with a dissertation. Well, let's see what we're up against. Green, so it could be a landfall or the typical Badger Mold decks that try to ramp into Ouroboros. So cover up should be decent. Yeah, it looks like landfall. So I probably want to just Withering Curse now to wipe both creatures. Going Shared Roots plus Duress, also an option to maybe take away like a Planar Engineering, which could have technically killed me with a Hydra. But a Curse seemed safer. Alright, so then now I guess I'll go Duress plus Shared Roots. They had a Commune with Beavers, Chocobo, Hydra. So especially if we can gain life to enable the curse, we should have an easy time handling their creatures. And then with Collect Evidence, we could also try and hit a forest if that presents itself. If they Earthbend onto it, then we can extract all the forests out of their deck, which is a funny interaction. So now Traveling Chocobo finds Land of the Top. That's lucky, and it's a fetch land as well. So yeah, Sass Chocobos hitting hard. So if I don't draw a land, I could be in a bit of trouble. I get a redraw with Cease to maybe set up the curse. Alright, the Professor could sacrifice itself for the greater good. Or I can just Cease, hope to draw an untapped land, and then Withering Curse can wipe things up. And then at this point get rid of the fetch lands for I Still Explore. Requiting Hex still deals with the Chocobo. I'll answer it before they untap. And then now Curse, even without the life gain, could still wipe away a Hydra and a Chocobo. Assuming it stays at a 1-1, but now of course with the Chocobo it grows twice. So I still want land for cover-up. Strategic Betrayal hits one of their creatures. They probably give up on Traveling Chocobo, and then I die if they draw a fetch land. So it's safer to just go Professor, destroy the Hydra. I lose Professor, but then Curse can maybe deal with both Chocobo and Bristly Bill if they don't draw land. Yeah, I guess that's fine. Just play it safe.
It's Professor Dellian Fel. Thank you.
I've got card draw with a Dissertation, so just want to preserve my life total. They have another land on top. So their Traveling Chocobo has been putting in work. So Professor down.
Death didn't stop me before.
And found land 5 at long last. So then now we go for cover-up. Extracting, I want to say the Mossborn Hydra, since Forest is not an option. Alternatively, I could go Withering Curse plus Strategic Betrayal and keep the cover-up for later, which is actually reasonable. Unless they've got a protection spell available, which could have maybe grown Bristly Bill in response. Another Traveling Chocobo. Alright, so at 15, I think I'm safe to Dissertation. South Chocobo over the top, since birds are also allowed. And a Requiting Hex. Still gonna draw 2 myself, hoping to find the Professor. Cornucopia is good too. And Liliana can also clean up. So this turn, probably go Liliana -4 as a clean answer. And then next turn I can start gaining life with the Cornucopia.
My army will envelop this. Don't speak ill of the undead.
And there's a Mossborn. Into Bristly Bill. Alrighty, so Cornucopia into cover-up is also an option. Could also just pulse the Hydra and then Hex Bill. Hexing in their turn, so we gain more life of Cornucopia as well. But I will do it before they draw, so they can draw into a hexproof trick. And I don't mind blinding onto the zombie either. So we've got plenty of life gain coming our way. And our opponent's not going to be able to keep up with all this interaction and card draw. Commune with beavers. Possible our opponent's not doing any earthbending, and they're kind of on an old school landfall deck. Never mind, Ba Sing Se is pretty good against a control deck like ours, but now we can cover up the forests like I mentioned, so that's going to be a fun play. Now of course that doesn't deal with the Ba Sing Se that's already on the battlefield, but I'm sure we'll manage. So draw 2. Alrighty, so cover up with Collect Evidence. That's what Cease Desist is very useful for as well. And then say goodbye to all your forests. Does mean that all the opponent's top decks from now on will be spells, but I think we'll manage. And then, of course, they still have a couple fetch lands that don't do much. Basing Say. Alright. And yeah, they did have the planar engineering. So that's done. Plus Liliana.
You've reached an undead end.
Got 31 cards remaining. Do need to find a professor to maybe help close out the game a little sooner. Haven't drawn any Restless Cottages yet. Opponent actually drew another Basing Say. But if they activate this, their land would be tapped. Yeah, I'm fine with the trade. Another Dissertation I'm probably not casting. And there's a Professor. So I've got more cards than I know what to do with. Professor's gonna try and ultimate as soon as possible.
Congratulations. You have a chance. This will only sting for a moment.
Hang on to the Adventure Sin for after the ultimates. And then Necropsy is also available. Chocobo is fine. Earthband onto Forest. And I'll just trade here. Think we can hang on to the Necropsy.
Yours will be a fate worse than undeath.
Can always point a Dissertation at my opponent if I'm worried about decking. Probably could have waited on Cornucopia, since we're probably going to cast a multicolored spell here. And our opponent finally scoops it up. Emblem, Professor Dellian Fel. And then with triple Cornucopia, it's going to be pretty quick to get the game over with. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a hand that could use some 4 or 5 mana card to ramp into with the Shared Roots. I think I still try it, so we've got plenty of payoffs. And at least the Betrayal gives us a flexible answer, whether they're on a creature deck or a graveyard deck. Alright, now Phyrexian Arena's nice. Pollinator not the scariest creature. If they had an Elves, maybe I would have Betrayaled it. Although it can still set up Bancher Mole into another 2-drop. So cannot be underestimated. But then again, we have plenty of board wipes we can draw to clean up all the smaller stuff. So I could double Shared Roots, or I can get a Phyrexian Arena going. I think I prefer the card draw. So their hand must have some top-end threats, if they kept a pretty slow one here. So expecting plenty of Ouroboros, maybe Quantum Riddlers. That we'll have to fight through. Okay, that was highly unexpected. Forsaken Miner. Right, now Withering Curse can clean up both. And then Cease could exile the Miner. Let's start here. Could also just Shared Roots. Opponent with an offer you can't refuse. Okay, that's fine. Get some treasure. And then, do I bother with a Strategic Betrayal? Yeah, it's probably fine here. Make it so that the Pollinator can make mana. If they get rid of the Miner, it's exile, so they can get it back. And then I don't feel the need to use my treasures just yet. Okay. I mean, people often ask me, hey, why aren't you ranking up to Mythic every month? This is part of the reason why, because once you reach Mythic, you do tend to get paired against a lot of non-meta decks, which can be entertaining, but maybe doesn't give the audience a very representative outlook on the format. Looks like a double Shared Roots turn. And then waiting for some of our Planeswalkers. Could have probably gotten a Forest. They do have a Drowner. So, yeah, still haven't pieced this one together. Maybe a Throne of the Grim Captain deck, since this is a Merfolk, this is a Skeleton to combine with the Corpses of the Lost to give the Skeleton Pirate haste, but that's maybe a bit of a stretch. Another Miner. Okay, so for now, what are we thinking? Probably just Shared Roots and then pass with Cottage as a blocker and Requiting Hex as removal. Can always blind onto the Cottage if it were to be removed in response. And there's Ouroboros that we were waiting on. So that resolves. Miner doesn't have an attack because of Cottage. And then now we need to draw one of our many sweepers. Miner does actually attack. Okay, now exile it from the graveyard. Another Cease will probably wait. Betrayal and Liliana. Alright, so now we can clean up the board. Hex the Drowner. And then -4 Liliana. Could have also seen an argument for using Betrayal and keeping up the Requiting Hex in case of a hasty token from Corpses of the Lost. But I can also maybe block with a Cottage. So end of turn, can Cease again. Maybe want to leave Ouroboros in the graveyard in case we can extract it with Cover Up. And there's a Professor. So we can go Cornucopia into the Professor to gain 4. And then probably speedrun the ultimates.
I need answers, and you're going to help.
And I'll keep the Cottage on defense. Maybe next turn I'll get more aggressive. Possible they have another Drowner, and then we want this back as a blocker. Yeah, this is where having the Hex instead of Betrayal could have paid off. Opponent's got another Ouroboros. So if their last card is Requiting Hex, they can attack past the Cottage. But I'll still try. That works. So just immediately gonna -6. Betrayal answers Ouroboros.
No way but my
And Cottage can start getting in. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with what looks like a functional hand. Ideally draw a couple more lands naturally. But we also have some ramp to go with it. The roots to get a swamp is important, so we also enable the Verge. Facing a red aggro deck. So yeah, this is a matchup where all the removal and the life gain should help. Next turn we can enable Withering Curse with another Adventures in. So don't mind seeing another creature. Although it turns out just giving -2/-2 is enough, so I can now just play the Cottage instead. I think at 11 I'm still safe, and the untapped land is going to matter next turn. As soon as we answer all the creatures, we can just start gaining a life with a Professor, and that's not something our opponent can keep up with for very long. They do have another Slick Shots into a burn spell, so we're down to 6. Yeah, I guess we just go Adventures in, and then Professor, although I'm half tempted to use the cover-up instead, although I can't collect evidence, just so we can keep the loyalty high on the Professor and they can't easily answer it. Also uses my mana pretty efficiently. Just want a turn where they don't play a creature, and then now we play the Prof and start plussing. And they'll need something pretty special to get back into it, and our opponent just scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a functional hand. Turn 2, we can cycle Cease if needed. But mostly Cornucopia setting up Dissertation with a Professor gaining life to offset it. Facing a red-white aggro. Yep, a lot of aggro decks today, so this should line up pretty well. Although this hand is lacking a sweeper, so if they play a couple more creatures, we could still be in trouble. Claw attacks. And pumps. Okay, so just gonna gain 2 life, draw a card. And now Hex is an excellent answer to the Claw. Can play it alongside either Cornucopia or Roots. I think I prefer Cornucopia. And then I don't think I need to Hex right away. Small chance they can protect the Claw. But they could also be running Sheltered by Ghosts, which I get to punish with a Hex. And yep, Speak of the Devil. And the Hex is better disguised when you just tap out for Cornucopia. So then now I think we can either Professor or Decorum. Kind of just like a high loyalty Professor here. So then I can also Terminus alongside it. A way to gain life so we can gain 2. And we'll gain some more. Since I have the Dissertation, I'm not too worried about losing out on the card draw. So we're at 27 life, facing an aggro deck. Challenger has to go after the Prof. And they have a Helix, so it's not quite dead. Which is all that matters. So we will gain life, I think. Or I could start with a Dissertation, see what we get. So no answer right now. Think I still go out gaining a life here. Force a Challenger to go after the Prof.
I can heal you.
And we picked up another Planeswalker. So sadly didn't get an emblem off. but I think we'll be just fine. And Gloria helix the Professor, Challenger goes face, and Curse wipes the board. Could also Liliana -4. But I prefer keeping this at a high loyalty. So Withering Curse, and then I can still double Shared Roots. Can wait on the Adventures Inn. So we're also thinning out the deck to make our draw steps more exciting. Haven't found any Restless Cottages yet. Those are great. Can also wait to game with Cornucopia in case I top deck a multicolored spell, like another Professor. Alrighty, so can I double spell Planeswalkers? I think I can. So Professor gain 2, +2 to gain 3. They did get to enable the Claw thanks to our dissertation, that is pretty funny.
Sit down. I'll handle this.
Gonna hang on to the Adventures Inn for after the ultimates. Going for a Rivalry for one is also reasonable, if they can clear the zombie, so they don't get to attack the Professor again with a Claw. Maybe I should just -4 since we have another Liliana in hand. Pretty drastic answer to a Hired Claw, but I think it makes sense. And our opponent will finish off Liliana. So now we can ultimate our Professor in peace. The second dissertation I'm probably not casting. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome! So yeah, we got to see this Golgari, a lifegain control deck in action. Certainly we'll run into some bad matchups every now and then. Thinking of Kona combo, which we got pretty lucky to beat thanks to that well-timed duress into cover up to exile the Omniscience. But yeah, if you want to improve that matchup, just add more cards like Shoot the Sheriff, instant speed removal to get rid of Kona before they can cheat out one of their cards. The matchups like Jeskai Control can also be a bit tougher, since of course we will have a lot of deaths draws with all our sweepers that are not going to be particularly effective. So like Jeskai Control, 4-color Control, those matchups are also going to be tougher. But in general, it feels like at least we've got a chance in every game with a good mix of interaction, card draw, and then some graveyard hate is also pretty important in best of one nowadays. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.